Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Now this is exactly what I've been talking about. When it comes to the Brandon administration, but more specifically Brandon himself, there's a lot to criticize. I mean, there's a lot going wrong. But probably the biggest focus of my criticism, at least recently, is all of the tone-deaf messaging. Joe Biden keeps saying how inflation is his #1 priority. I mean, supposedly the fact that inflation is his #1 concern, and of course, it also means that if that's his #1 concern, then the economy must not be going so hot. Well, given all of that, you would think that the Brandon administration would be a little bit sympathetic to the economic woes that people are currently experiencing. You would think that their rhetoric wouldn't be so completely out of touch, not only out of touch with how Americans are feeling, but out of touch with reality. But of course, it's Brandon we're talking about. It's the Democrats after all, and they're as elitist, as out of touch, and as insufferable as they've always been. And it's getting to the point where it's just frustrating. Joe Biden asked a question today, a very simple question, and his reaction is telling. He snapped at the reporter, accused them of acting like a Republican, and then proceeded to lie. Basically his go-to anytime he's asked a real question. Get angry, deny reality, and blame Republicans or blame Donald Trump. Or of course these days, blame Vladimir Putin. But I gotta show you guys exactly what he says, as frustrating as it is to listen to this guy. It's yet again another example proving that the Democrats just don't care about you. Let me show you guys exactly what he said, and then let's do a deep dive into the dumpster that is the Brandon regime. We've got some dumpster diving to do, folks, so let's roll the tape. Alright friends, so take a look at this. Joe Biden gets asked a very simple question and snaps.
I promise. Recession's even more likely than ever.
Not the majority of them aren't saying that. Come on, don't make things up, okay? Now you sound like a Republican politician.
Well, that right there, folks, is the exact answer that you want from your president, now isn't it? I mean, that's ideal. Thank God for Uncle Joe. I mean, when you envision great leadership, the first thing that probably comes to mind is denial. You know, Joe seems real frustrated, real pissed, to be asked any questions related to the economy or a recession. And you know what my immediate response to that is? You don't get to be pissed. You, Joe, one of the major factors and catalysts in this potential upcoming recession, don't get to be pissed while average middle-class Americans are paying thousands of dollars more each year, not in taxes, but in basic cost of living expenses. You don't get to be pissed when people's 401ks are crashing to the bottom of the sea. Oh, but Liberal Hive Mind, didn't you see the S&P 500 is up 2% today? All the shorts are being liquidated. Sure, it's probably just another dead cat bounce. It means absolutely nothing. Markets are crashing and will most likely continue to crash. And Fed predictions and Fed estimates are getting worse and worse every single week. In fact, an organization called the New York Fed just put out their model or their prediction, and they are predicting 2 years of a negative GDP contraction, economic contraction. A recession is 2 quarters of economic contraction. They're predicting 2 years of negative GDP. But Joe Biden says that no, none of this is true. Of course not. His go-to, lying about the experts. No serious economist thinks that inflation is gonna get out of hand, Joe Biden said famously, or rather infamously, not too long ago. Oh, all the Nobel laureates and all the serious economists all agree with me, even though we've covered how many Republican, Democrat, and neutral, independent, non-partisan economists, all of them have warned of a recession or are claiming that we are in some very rough and turbulent economic times. But this administration continues to say the same thing over and over again.
And right now, we don't see a recession. Right now, we're not in a recession right now. Right now, we're in a transition where we are going to go into a place of stable and steady growth, and that's going to be our focus.
And just one more. Of course, Janet Yellen says a recession is not inevitable, and that Russia's war is to blame for soaring inflation. Yes, it's all Russia's fault, even though inflation basically peaked before the invasion. And so this disturbing trend continues. A denial of reality. But probably the most egregious, most offensive, most annoying and frustrating part is the constant lying. I mean, let's make an analogy. Let's say the Biden regime, or my apologies, the Brandon regime, is your doctor. Things aren't looking so good, and what you need is a diagnosis so you know what you need to do to get better. But your doctor keeps telling you that, oh, don't worry about it. You look pretty sick. It looks pretty bad. It's my #1 priority to fix it. But a couple Nobel laureates and experts told me that there's nothing to worry about, so actually just go home. And then a couple weeks go by and you're sicker than you've you've ever been. What the American people need right now is a dose of reality. What the American people need right now is real leadership and a president that is willing to take on hard times, admit that they're hard times, and do something about it. Enable the Fed to get aggressive and tackle inflation seriously, not slowly tackle inflation a year and a half after it started. Continue to kick the can down the road and pretend like everything is okay. I mean, it almost feels like Groundhog Day. You remember the rhetoric when inflation first started. Oh, well, it's just transitory. It's going to be a momentary blip, and then immediately it's going to come down. Well, now apparently they're just saying the same thing about the economy.
I know the president said recession is not inevitable. It seems increasingly probable. The Conference Board put out their survey this week. It shows 8 out of 10 global CEOs now expect a recession within the next 12 to 18 months. So what power does the president have to stop that kind of contraction?
Well, I think where we are in the economy right now is in a transition. And I spoke to CEOs over the course of the past week from sectors across the economy, and they're figuring out how to navigate this transition. Some of this is exactly what we need to see.
They're planning around a recession.
Well, they're planning around transitions in our economy. People are buying less goods, spending time at home. They're spending more on services. That creates some real challenges for some companies and some CEOs.
This is the go-to line. Anytime anything doesn't go well, it's just transitory, or it's just seasonal. We heard this with the border when clearly it wasn't. In fact, record levels of over 200,000 migrants a month still going on at the southern border. The media just refuses to talk about it. Inflation is still rampant. In fact, it might actually be ramping up. And if the Biden administration is saying, well, the economic downturn is just a transition period and it's nothing to be worried about and a recession isn't coming, well then, most likely it's not a transitory period, and most likely a recession is coming, which is what pretty much every single credible, serious economist is telling you. They're either saying that it's going to happen in 2022, quarter 3, quarter 4, maybe even this summer if a negative quarter 2 GDP number is released, and if not in 2023. Every serious economist, most of the major banks are all predicting a recession, and not only an American recession, but a global recession. But Brandon gets real pissed and real sassy when asked about the question, throws a little bit of a hissy fit, and tells us that no economists are predicting that. What a clown this guy continues to prove himself to be. But I guess what the real problem is that Joe Biden just knows so much better than we do. The problem isn't slowing down economic data and indicators, a crashing economy after this era of stimulus. No, of course not. The problem is you and your ungrateful attitude.
Is a phenomenal negative psychological impact that COVID has had on the public psyche. And so you have an awful lot of people who are, notwithstanding the fact that things have gotten so much better for them economically, that they are thinking, but how do you get up in the morning feeling happy? Right. Happy that everything's all right.
He's said variations of this exact statement on so many different occasions. The problem is never Joe. The problem is that the media is just not covering all of his historic success. The problem isn't Joe. The problem is that people are just psychologically unhappy after the coup. Again, folks, the most important virtue to being a good leader is being in complete denial and being totally delusional. And in Joe's case, let's add being a liar to the list. And such a repeated chronic liar that even far-left CNN fact checkers call Biden's claim of personally reducing the deficit almost a bizarro world. Of course, the other strategy that we've covered many times before, Joe Biden trying to take credit for other people's work, Donald Trump's policies having certain effect at the southern border, and Joe Biden tries to take credit as a southern border hawk. Joe Biden being stopped by his own party by Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin from passing totally irresponsible spending packages. Well, now that Joe Biden's been blocked, well, he's just personally reducing the deficit. The Brandon regime is at it once again. And honestly, folks, there's a lot of indicators and metrics and data to make a prediction right here on what's going to happen with the economy. Probably the best one is do the opposite, or whatever is opposite from what the administration is saying. Well, that's probably going to happen, or probably what you should do. I mean, what a laughable statement that most economists actually aren't predicting a recession. They all are. But that's what I got, folks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.